Hey guys, it's Jay with Kevsky Diaspora. Over Labor Day weekend, a group of us went up to Heritage Hills State Park up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Had a great time getting to know the site, meeting the people up there. While we were there, we got to do some interviews with some really neat people. This one's with Jay Oestreich. I think you'll enjoy it. Really neat guy, has done a lot, is doing a lot. Just a really fun reenactor. Hi Jay.
Good morning.
Why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself please, and tell us about what you do.
All right, so my name is Jay Oestreich. Obviously I'm a reenactor. I currently do British militia under the guise of Goff's Company of New Hampshire, which is located out of Bow, New Hampshire, just off the Connecticut River. The Goffs used to be called Blatcher's Colonial Militia, and then we changed the name to be more representative of the small number of people that we were actually fielding as opposed to a regiment. So
yeah,
got a little pretentious.
Yeah, it does get kind of interesting when someone's like, "I'm such and such regiment," like
right,
both of you.
Right, exactly. At least we could say we were a file of a company as opposed to a file off of a whole regiment. It felt
yeah.
But I'm second generation reenactor. My father started reenacting when I was a kid. I was basically started when I was about 3 or 4 years old.
That's cool.
Just turning 50 in October.
That's cool.
So, and then raised all 3 of my daughters in reenacting, and my granddaughter was at her first reenactment last year.
That's awesome.
So, just kind of trying to keep everything alive.
That's 3, what's that, 4 generations?
4 generations.
That's wow.
So, I currently...
You're kind of reenacting royalty then, in a way.
No, I wouldn't say that, but I've been around a while.
It's
always fun when you get into a car with somebody and they're like, I've been doing this for 12 years. And I'm like, you don't want to know.
Yeah.
But part of that, though, is I've actually made a historical journey because my dad first got involved in the rendezvous set, right?
Yeah.
So very loosey-goosey, pre-1840 mountain man stuff. Did that all the way up through my early teens. Then he stepped forward, back in time to Rev War with the 3rd New York with the NWTA. Did that for several years, and then I disappeared for a while because I graduated high school, I joined the service, I got married, I had kids. The
life stuff.
Weekends tended to be full of drill and or other things. Kind of freaked my wife out when I showed up with a sewing machine and it said we're going camping, and she said, well, why do I need a sewing machine? So I'm like, well, I got to make you clothes.
So yeah, because you said you're doing the tailor stuff. So you made your outfitting here, right?
Yes, and this is something I actually about 10
years
ago.
Threw together.
Yeah, just something just. So about 10 years ago, maybe 12 now, a friend and I were trying to introduce a new family to the hobby, and he's like, started asking questions like, how do you know this? How do you know that? And I was like, that's a really good question, because I knew. What I knew was good because my dad had done all the research, and I was just essentially regurgitating what I knew. But when I had someone new asking me, how did I know? I started like, okay. So I started going back to original sources, and going back to primary and secondary sources to have these, so I could point them to these locations, and that's where the Endeavor was born.
Wow.
So the Endeavor Project on Facebook is basically, I try to post 2 or 3 things every couple of days, and what I really do is I put myself in front of information streams. So I rarely post anything that's new content by myself. I'm passing on stuff from museums or sutlers who are like William Booth does basically a daily thing that's completely non-commercial, it's informational. He gets a reshare from me almost every day. But workshops, seminars, doesn't matter where they're at, virtual, in person, if I can find out about them, I'll share them. Now I have a relatively small following, I'll admit that. It's focused on the upper Midwest to help improve the quality of our reenactors. And because what I realized when we were trying to introduce that new family was people just don't know where to get the information. And now so many museums have their collections digitally available online. You don't actually have to go to the museum. And so many of these museum staff now have reenactors that are part of their curation staff.
Yeah.
So you go, hey, I want to get some additional pictures of this particular garment. The pictures show up in your inbox.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, no, you have to come here.
We had working with Dr. David Blackmore in the UK several years ago. He had put a paper together talking about how museums, reenactors, and archaeologists, anthropologists need to start working together because we're all holding pieces of the puzzle that the others need.
It's a three-legged stool.
And it's setting up the overall context.
Yeah.
Everybody's missing contextual stuff, and we're the idiots that go out and experiment to figure out how does this work.
Yeah, that was one of my dad's stories that likes to tell is a friend of his who was doing primitive arrowhead making had been at a conference of archaeologists, and they were talking about how much labor and how long it took to make arrowheads. It's like, I'll be right back. Got his stuff out of the car, dropped it on the table. It's like, snap, 5 minutes, there's your arrowhead. That's why you're finding hundreds of them in a spot.
Yeah.
Because they're that fast. Once you know what you're doing, you can just crank them out. Yeah. Experimental archaeology, that's the part that really makes it attractive for the hobby. But yeah, basically everything you're seeing is handmade except the socks. I don't do socks. Shoes were from Brett Walker. He trained in Williamsburg as a shoemaker. But I made the waistcoat, the breeches, and the jacket. And that was something, when I started when that family started asking me these questions, I went back and I reevaluated everything, started over from scratch, and rebuilt the entire outfits for all my wife, my kids, myself, and because I wanted to do it right.
That's awesome.
And now I know I'm doing all hand stitch, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's really crazy." You know what? I'm going to meet you wherever along the line of crazy that you're willing to go.
Yeah.
Right. If it's all machine stitch, that's fine. If you want to do machine stitch and hand finish, that's fine too. If you want to do it fully hand stitch, I will help you figure that out.
Well, that's over time with practice. Doesn't the hand stitch get faster?
Yeah. But what I found
not sewing machine speed necessarily, but still more quickly than sitting there and stab your thumb and what have you. Yeah.
And I think the main thing about hand stitching your clothes is, one, it's the way they did it, but two, there's certain ways that the garments have to go together that just cannot be done on a machine. They have to be done by hand. A perfect example is women's gowns, okay, where they sew the arm's eye in. It's a top stitch across the top, but it's a back stitch underneath. How do you make that switch on a machine? It's going to be a simulated back stitch the entire time. Well, now it's too rigid on the top. It doesn't have a little bit of flex, which that top stitch will get.
Yeah.
Right. And how do you get a nice, good, clean hem stitch when you're sewing an 1/8 inch off the edge of the fabric with a machine?
Yeah.
The dog is just going to tear the fabric to the side.
Yeah.
So, and then if you do bag lining and then you flip it in and try to stitch it, it just doesn't look right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of challenges with using fully machined, but I'm not above cheating every once in a while. The coat I just recently made, I used the machine to do the seams on the sleeves.
Yeah.
They're on the inside. No one's going to see them, and it's just done. But everything else has gone together by hand because it just has to.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic. It's also very relaxing.
Yeah.
You get home after a stressful week of work, and you're just like, I got nothing going this weekend. I'm going to put 16 hours onto this garment. Just sit there, listen to the radio, watch TV, and really only get about 3 hours of work done, but you just kind of relax and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and you don't do it for sale. You're just doing it for yourself and so your own education, your own edification.
Yeah, and also, but part of it, the other reason is I picked it up is so that I could teach other people in our unit.
Yeah.
Help the ladies, help the guys know how to make their stuff, which kind of ties us into Heritage Hill. A couple years ago, we were down here at a reenactment, and one of the regular volunteers for the park was down with us, and he was a hot mess of historical stuff. He was wearing Apache boots and trying to do this is, Western fur trade, but we're not in the Western fur trade, and you wouldn't have been wearing Apache boots in the Rocky Mountains. And so I approached Claire and Michael, who was the director at the time, and I want to have a conversation about the men's clothing down here, right? And so what I basically did is I volunteered to start consulting with them teaching them the amount. Now, granted, I'm not a master tailor. I'm not even a journeyman tailor. I would say I'm an advanced apprentice who's mostly self-taught, but it's better than what they currently have, which is nobody. So we're trying to get them new shirts, new breeches, new coats, everything that's properly set up for that 1761 to 1763 period, where Heritage Hill basically gets turned over to the English,
right?
La Bay,
right?
And we picked that period of time because it was primarily French for a really long time. Then it becomes English, and if they want to, much like Thai does, they alternate years and alternate French, English, American. They could do that here. They go, okay, well this year we're going to do 58 and 59, all French Marines, everything, and then next year they go back to 62. So they could play with that time, that transition time, without having to do a lot of drastic changes to the outfits.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to go through their clothing locker, and I was, oh no, this is not good. Yeah, that way they had this rack of waistcoats that were like, this is our La Bay area waistcoats. I said, those belong in the 19th century.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that was how, but they didn't know, and it helped them rebuild their, rewrite their clothing standards for the men. A lot of the resources were good for the time that it was originally written, but so much more has come out in the last decade.
Oh dear God, the last 5 years, it's been
it's just
staggering.
It's staggering, and there's so many more locations that are more than willing to help, share their stuff. During that time, I got in contact with Leanne Uwer up at Colonial Mission Mackinac. She shared her standards. I already had theirs that I was rebuilding, but it gave me some additional ideas of how to present the standards for people, for the layman. And it's just, people should know what they know, and have the resources. Should go to their local historical site, society, whatever, especially if they're trying to have clothed interpreters, and volunteer to help them evaluate their standards. The standards I was looking at hadn't been touched in over 20 years.
I remember another thing also with that, I think in the 80s and 90s, I remember dealing with people who had some piece of information, allegedly, primary documentation, that was theirs and theirs alone.
They wouldn't share
and they lorded that over everybody, but they never shared it. And especially with how the hobby has kind of reduced the last few years, I think it's something we should be getting that information. You got the info, get it out there. Yeah, and get it to everybody.
Yeah, and that's part of the Endeavor's mission is, share as much information as we can, connect people into networks, communicate. This guy over here is doing a particular impression, and there's a guy over here who's trying to develop the same thing. Hey, let's get you guys together, and you can share information, and you could actually, form a unit instead of just being a one-off. And so that's kind of where the impetus for the Endeavor was developed. It was trying to get people into contact, and I've got grand aspirations of tying unit commanders together, and
I'm right there with you.
Yeah,
that's.
But it would not.
Well, I know you're a big fan of 7 Years War Inc. But when I started it, that was the idea. Was getting the communication moving, getting the unit commanders working together, get the units working together, so you could put more on the field and work on the actual scale and scope. It's not what it is today, but that's what it was at the time. It was that very idea. So I'm all with you on that.
Yeah, and again, the grand scheme isn't to supplant those umbrella organizations. They have a reason, they have a purpose, but to work alongside them and act as a feeder of either people or information in and out to try to just, like you say, improve everybody.
Exactly.
Because as much as we think that the public doesn't know,
they pick up on
They
stuff.
can tell the difference between someone who's dressed right and someone who isn't if they're standing next to each other.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like,
it leaps out.
It's the same clothes, but one of you, that one looks
something
better.
different.
Yeah. So they're not as stupid as we think. We should.
I don't know, that one guy
they're
yesterday.
Uninformed.
Uninformed. You're so kind. So
well, one of the phrases I use is help meeting people wherever basically where they're at without being a jerk. Because no one wants to talk to a jerk. So that took me a long time not to be a jerk. So I'm trying to keep that moving.
I'm
forward.
still working on that myself. Well, awesome. You got anything else you want to say real quick, Jay?
Come up to the hill. I mean, it's a great place. They basically give us free reign of the park while we're here.
Yeah, this is an awesome site.
Yeah, I mean, fur trade cabin, if you actually know fur trade, which I do because I used to do fur trade presentations.
Yeah.
You know, most of the time, it's part of the reason why I said over at the tavern yesterday and today is because if I'm in here, people are like, oh, this is a fur trade cabin, telling me about the furs. I'm like, okay, here's your 10-minute spiel. So I'm going to focus on the tailoring, which is extremely underrepresented aspect of the
that was
time.
Pervasive through everything. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like the second person to show up behind a blacksmith.
Yeah.
And like the shoemakers were shortly after that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because everyone needed clothes, everyone needed repairs done. You know, it's because just like anywhere else, you know, stuff breaks.
Yeah, and they didn't actually do it all themselves, contrary to what many people think. Yeah.
Right. Even the soldiers didn't do it all themselves. They had regimental tailors, and they got the new issue that, you know, you basically got locked in a tent with whoever else had some sewing skills, and you were there for 3 months.
Can you thread a needle? Yes? Good. Come with me.
Exactly. Yeah.
The good news is you're exempt duty.
Right. Yeah. Except you're going to work 16-hour days.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Hope you like sewing.
Right. If you did, you will.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice. But yeah, I mean, they give us free reign of the park. The fact that Trigby and Rick with the 60th are both on the board, is a great advantage to having access to the park. But they've got chickens that we can have eggs from. They've got gardens that if the season's right, we can get vegetables and fruit.
I saw somebody working the garden in front of the
King's
trade
Garden.
post.
They pulled out some cucumbers, and Joel pulled out fingerling potatoes and some other stuff yesterday. But they have another garden up by the Tonk Cottage.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of, if the season's right, you know, you can eat here off of what you get here.
Oh, that's awesome.
If you want.
That's awesome.
Unless you want meat, but you can't shoot the deer. So, sorry.
Oh no, there's that one dead one down.
Yes.
It's a day later now. I'm not sure it's any good at this point.
Yeah, Joel was talking about it yesterday.
Have to boil it a lot. So
come down. It's great. I mean, they love us here. It's
a great opportunity and a great facility.
Yeah, and we have access all the way to the river. So if you want to bring a canoe, put in a canoe and do a canoe camp or something, there may be spots down there that could be developed for that purpose.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of communicating with the site and talking about what you potentially want to do. The executive director, well, I think the interim director, the previous executive director for sure, was all about getting people and showing life and, you know, having just things that happen. Because when we show up, it just frees them up to do. They can open up other buildings, and interpret additional buildings as opposed to, you know, one person down here and one person way up there.
Right.
Now you got half a dozen people down here, and they can take the docent that was going to be down here and put them up in the Moravian church or something.
Yeah, more efficient use of their staff.
Right. Yeah, and all we need is wood, water, and toilets.
Yeah, we don't necessarily need part of that. So.
Right.
Well, awesome, Jay. Thank you very much for your time. I think we're supposed to do something here.
Yep, we have some presentation we're going to do here with the 60th as they have another man take the King's shilling.
Good. Need more of those.
Exactly.
Thanks, bud.
So I hope you like that little interview. Please like, share, and subscribe so you can enjoy what we do next.